Neptown Tuner here. Today, I'm going to show you a little bit about the Camshaft Bridge, the Camshaft Adjustment Bridge on the 2.0 liter TFSI 2009 up to 2016. Okay, in my previous video, I threw this lower timing case on, and I didn't film it, but I threw this front pulley on. Let me just give you a tip on throwing the front pulley on, because I got another pulley sitting right over here. See how it's got one triangle on there? See that triangle? Right there? Okay? That keyway has to go in and fit perfectly, all right? It's also got a couple timing marks. Let me show you the marks. There's some notches right here. See those notches? There's two notches on the edge. Right there and right there. And then if we spin it over a little bit, there's also a white mark, all right? The white mark is really hard to see most of the time because it's got junk on it. This one I'm not gonna be able to see. Let me see. There's a very light white mark, all right? Also, there's a super hard to see triangle stamped in that metal where that white mark goes. And then there's a super hard to see triangle stamped in this metal case right here, right where these two notches go. All right, so there's two different timing marks. This correlates with top dead center for #1 piston. So that's another way that you can check it. You can put your longest quarter drive extension in cylinder #1 and then go back and forth until it plateaus perfectly. But ultimately, the best way to make sure that you're on time is just to spin it to this little tiny triangle stamped in the case, which is super hard to see. You have to look really close. And then these two little notches. All right, it's not even about the pulley. Let's move on. What this video is about is the camshaft bridge. I'm gonna show you, this is the old style camshaft bridge. The old style camshaft bridge, the part number is (06H103166G). Here I have the updated camshaft bridge. It looks almost identical. I'll show you the backside right here. You see this lip. This is for, keep on accidentally hitting the button. I'm trying to do one take here, the record button. Anyway, back to the camshaft bridges. This is the brand new one. The part number on the updated style is 06H103166H instead of G. Usually it's the same part number, but the very last alphabetical numeral will increase in the alphabet. So it goes from a G to an H. The H is the updated one, if that makes any sense. So let's take a closer look at the old style and why they updated it. First of all, let me explain a little bit about what this does. It fits on the engine like this, okay? The intake camshaft is this big side, and the exhaust camshaft is that small side. The exhaust camshaft is very complicated, and that's why it's called a TFSI. It's got solenoids that pop out like this and actually physically change the cam profile. It slides it over from your regular cam profile to a larger profile. I have an exhaust camshaft right here, and I'll show you. It's VTEC on steroids. You see those two different profiles, all right? See how I can shift this camshaft back and forth? It's gonna be hard to see. I'm shifting it back and forth with my thumb. You typically can't do that because it's got a ball and a spring in there. The ball and the spring popped out of this one. If you just go sliding your camshaft around, you can go and a spring and a ball will shoot out. All right, I've had to sell multiple camshafts to people because they take it apart or they try to, press it together to fit right, and it springs the ball. And you want to stay tuned whenever I put the camshafts in, because I'll make another video on how to put the camshafts in absolutely perfect so that you don't do any damage whatsoever, because it is easy to do just a tiny bit of damage with those sliding camshafts, with the actuators. Here's all the actuators right here. At 4,000 RPMs, the engine actually physically changes the camshaft profile. That's what it does on the exhaust side. On the intake side, we have oil actuated. This is an oil actuated timing, all right? So you have a physical cam profile that changes over at 4,000 RPM, and your intake cam is variable with oil pressure, and your cam adjuster on the front of your camshaft. That's why the intake camshaft and the exhaust camshaft are both pretty pricey, and I've had nothing but problems with aftermarket intake camshaft. I have purchased aftermarket parts before, I admit, even though OEM parts are the best, bar none. I have dabbled in the aftermarket world, and I will say one thing that you should never, ever, 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 ever buy is a used camshaft. No, I'm sorry, not a used, an aftermarket camshaft for this engine. Don't do it. It's better to buy a used one, is where I was going with that. But, you know, I take all my heads to the machine shop, and I even have my camshafts polished. All right, so we went through the basics of what the cam adjuster does. Let me show you how the old part fails. Do you see this oil screen? Let me put it right up to the camera. There's a ball and a screen right here. You're gonna get a better view of this one because it's not busted. That one still has the screen on it, so there's a metal screen over the ball. This one, the metal screen, you see it right there? It's completely busted out. There's only a little bit around the edge, and you just see that metal retaining ball. That's where the oil flows. You see the oil flows up this path right here and into your cam adjuster on your intake. In my experience, it's only gonna take about 60,000 miles or so, and this screen blows out every single time. And what can happen, even on the updated style, for a while they were just selling that screen, and I was popping the screen out and putting a new screen in, this old style. The biggest revision with this doesn't have to do with the screen though. The biggest revision has to do with the collar. The collar only goes around 50% of this right here. It's kind of hard to explain, but it has to do with the offset of the camshaft. If you'll notice this newer style, the offset, the lip on that intake camshaft bearing, all right, it goes about 75%. So supposedly it does a better job of holding the camshaft properly in place. Personally, what I like to do is I like to pop that screen out even on a new one. And I'll take a flathead screwdriver and I'll just jam it in there and pop it out. So let me see if I can just, I'm holding the camera in my other hand and I'm doing all this because I don't even have a camera mount. So let me see if I can do this right in front of you with just, let me pop this literally brand new expensive part. But what I'm gonna do, I'll set it on the bench here. Okay, I'm trying to get a decent view. Literally, I'm gonna just poke it through, and some of y'all won't like this. See that? I just popped it out. Just popped it all the way out. And I'm not even gonna use it, I don't like it. What happens is it's gonna bust through, just like I showed you. It's just gonna break, it's gonna bust through, and where is that screen gonna go? The screen is gonna get stuck in the oil port. The oil port is right here. The screen is gonna get jammed up in there, and what I've seen happen is it destroys your camshaft journals. And this piece right here can get, actually, for some reason, in my experience, it's always the exhaust camshaft that gets scored and it gets stuck on. Even though it appears that the oil only goes to the intake, there's also a journal for the, I mean, it has to be. I mean, the oil has to go everywhere. It has to cover all the bearing surfaces. Anyway, in my experience, it typically just destroys the exhaust journal for some reason. But if that screen isn't in there to pop out or to break, then you don't have to worry about destroying your camshaft. I mean, now I will say that I've only seen this a dozen times to maybe a dozen times, but there is a TSB on it. There's a revised part. All right, it is a consistent problem on a very tiny scale. So it's better to just take my advice and pop it out, because every single one I've popped out, I've never had a problem with. It's better to, people thumbs down me for stupid stuff like this, but I have experience with it, okay? You're gonna score the bearing if you don't. If you pop it out, you won't score the bearing. Let me show you how to put it on now, because these things can be very tricky to put on. So what I did first is I took some grease, some assembly grease. I trust in assembly grease. I use assembly grease, okay? One thing I will say is I have the cap off right here. One time, I had the cap off too long, and I laid it on the ground or somewhere dirty, and the piece of rock or piece of small metal or piece of junk got in there. And the next time I used it, I squirted in all the bearing journals on my rebuilt cylinder head, and I put it all together and tightened it all down. And guess what? A piece of junk that I didn't see that was in my assembly grease completely destroyed one of my bearing journals, and I had to trash that head. So that was like a $1,200 mistake. So I'm sharing that with you. So little thing like this, a little thing like keeping your grease clean, keeping the cap on it. Like looks pretty grungy, all right? You don't want to just keep your cap off your grease, or, first off, it's a good idea to, keep the tube for sure. But if you want to be really sure that you don't have any junk in there first, go ahead and squeeze a little bit out first and then use it. It's also good if it's good grease and not years old, updated stuff, so it has a good consistency and it's not all liquidy. Back to putting this cam adjuster on. This cam adjuster can be pretty tricky. Taking it off, there's this adjuster plug that goes in there to assist the oil flow. This goes on the intake camshaft. There is a special tool that goes in those two little slots. This one is actually off of a newer vehicle, because it's got the two slots are directly across from each other. But the tool that you typically use looks exactly like this. And I showed in a different video where it's a reverse thread. I've showed in a different video where if you absolutely don't have the tool, or you can't get a hold of it, or you're in a pinch, remember, it's reverse thread. This plunger is reverse thread. See the threads on there? So if you don't have a tool to put in there and then turn it righty-loosey, then you can, it's not advisable, but to get by, you can take a punch and carefully punch it loose. I'm not gonna use the correct tool, but you can take a punch and a hammer and lightly tap it loose in one of these holes and spin it around. You can do it, I've done it. All right, what's the part number on the special tool? This is an aftermarket one. This has a VW side and an Audi side. Does it have a part number on it? No, it doesn't. Would have told you, but it's not on there. So, I put the assembly grease on the cams. Then we're going to take the cam adjuster and we're going to put it on as even as possible. All right, we're just going to set it there. All right. See that? Now what I like to do is I like to take an 18mm wrench on the intake cam behind the adjuster, and I'll take my palm and I'll kind of push it against this adjuster, flat and even, and then I'll rotate the cam back and forth. You can do the same thing with the crankshaft, but it's all up here and really easy to do. So let me see if I can set this camera down. So all you do is unfortunately, I tapped the button again for the record. I got a new phone and I'm fumbling with it apparently. But all you do is you rotate the camshaft back and forth just a little bit, and all that does, and as you do that, you just barely press and hold on this evenly, on this cam adjuster. Cam bridge is what they call it. Put light pressure on it with one hand as you're rotating the camshaft back and forth with the other. It just comes back right flush. You don't want to force it in with the bolts. That would be a horrible idea, horrible. And you don't want to take a hammer and try to tap it in. That's also a horrible idea. Just lightly, and you can rotate the engine as well with the crankshaft if you're so inclined, because some people have their panties bunched up in their rear too far, and they're like, "You're turning the engine with the camshaft?" I've done this a few times, okay? All I'm doing is going right back and forth just a hair. That's how you do it correctly, all right? Now you just put your bolts back in. Remember, this is reverse thread. It doesn't have much torque. It's just, and then your other bolt right here. This is what your other bolt looks like. It just goes right in here. So that's all there is to it. I hope I explained the revision on the camshaft bridge. It's not an extremely necessary part. The most necessary part and review about the camshaft bridge is popping out the metal screen. Running the old camshaft bridge, in my opinion, I've had no problems with it. Would I prefer to have updated parts, all updated parts on my engine? Absolutely. That camshaft bridge from the dealer, it's probably over $300. It's probably about $350. So it's a good idea to do whatever your budget allows you to do, but now you know. Until next time, and for more videos, subscribe. And if you have any suggestions for other videos, please leave them in the comments. Until next time, Naptown Tuner.